When the billionaire Sebastian Croft told his 7-month pregnant wife, Isabel, that she wasn't welcome on their multi-million-dollar yacht trip, but his mistress was, he thought he held all the power. He was wrong. While he and his lover sailed toward the sunset, Isabel, the woman he underestimated, was about to unleash a storm he never saw coming. In a single night, she would leave him stranded and penniless. This is the story of how a woman scorned froze her husband's billion-dollar empire overnight. Isabel Croft traced the rim of her porcelain teacup, the delicate floral pattern, a stark contrast to the tempest brewing within her. The morning sun, usually a welcome guest in their palatial penthouse overlooking Central Park, felt like an intruder. Today, its golden rays illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Tiny, insignificant, much like she felt in that moment. 7 months pregnant, she carried the heir to the Croft fortune, a fortune built on Sebastian's ruthless business acumen and her family's old-world connections. Yet here she was, a prisoner in a gilded cage, about to be dismissed like a disobedient child. Sebastian, her husband of 5 years, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her. Even in his casual cashmere sweater and tailored trousers, he exuded an aura of indomitable power. He was a man accustomed to getting his way, a modern-day Midas, whose touch turned everything to gold, or so the financial magazines proclaimed. He was also a man who had, for the past year, been engaged in a very public and unapologetic affair with Sienna Vance, a social media influencer, whose manufactured pout and curated life were the antithesis of everything Isabel represented. "The serenity is ready," Sebastian said, his voice as smooth and cold as the marble under his feet. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. His reflection in the panoramic window, a ghost superimposed over the Manhattan skyline, was enough to convey his dismissive authority. "We sail for the Amalfi Coast at sunset." Isabel's hand trembled, a slight, almost imperceptible tremor that she immediately stilled. "We." The word hung in the air, a cruel, sharp-edged weapon. For months, she had been planning this trip, a final baby moon before their son arrived. She had imagined the warm Mediterranean sun on her skin, the gentle rocking of the yacht, lulling her to sleep, a brief respite from the suffocating reality of her marriage. "I've already packed my bags," she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too brittle. She had tried to ignore the whispers, the tabloid photos of Sebastian and Sienna draped over each other at exclusive clubs, the sympathetic, pitying glances from their so-called friends. She had convinced herself that the baby would change everything, that the arrival of their son would be the anchor that would steady their drifting marriage. Sebastian finally turned his handsome face, a mask of detached impatience. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held no warmth, no flicker of the love he had once professed. "You're not going, Isabel." The words, though softly spoken, landed like a physical blow. Isabel felt the air rush out of her lungs. "What do you mean, Sebastian? We planned this. The doctor said it was safe for me to travel. I've spoken to Dr. Evans myself," he lied, his gaze unwavering. "He agrees that it's an unnecessary risk. You should be resting, not bobbing around on the ocean." A bitter laugh escaped Isabel's lips. "So, you're suddenly concerned about my well-being, or is it that my pregnant form is an inconvenience to your romantic getaway?" Sienna's name remained unspoken, a phantom presence that haunted their conversations. Sebastian's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "This is not a debate. I've made my decision." "Your decision." Isabel's voice rose, laced with a fury she hadn't realized she possessed. "You mean her decision? Does Sienna not want the pregnant wife cramping her style?" Sebastian's face hardened into a familiar, cruel mask. "Sienna has nothing to do with this. This is about your health and the health of our child." Our child Isabel stood up her belly, a prominent, proud curve under her silk robe. "This is my child Sebastian, the one I'm carrying, the one I'm protecting. And you're more concerned with protecting your mistress from the unsightly reality of your life." The slap of his words was more painful than any physical blow. "You're being hysterical, Isabel. It's the hormones." That was his go-to dismissal, the convenient excuse for her emotions, her frustrations, her pain. He had wielded it like a weapon throughout their marriage, a way to invalidate her feelings and assert his control. But this time, something within Isabel snapped. The years of quiet acquiescence, of swallowing her pride and her tears, came to a screeching halt. "Don't you dare!" she whispered, her voice dangerously low. "Don't you dare reduce me to a cliché. I am your wife, the mother of your child. I have a right to be on that yacht. You have a right to what I give you," he retorted, his voice dripping with condescension. "And right now I'm giving you the comfort of this home while I take a much-needed break. Sienna is coming with me. She's been under a lot of stress." The audacity of his statement stole her breath. Stress. What could Sienna possibly be stressed about choosing the right filter for her next Instagram post? "And I haven't." Isabel's voice cracked. "Carrying your child while my husband flaunts his affair in my face. That's not stressful. I will not have this conversation again," he said, turning his back on her once more, a gesture of finality. "My decision is made. You will stay here. I'll call you when we dock." He walked towards the door, his footsteps echoing the finality of his words. Isabel stood frozen, a storm of emotions raging within her. Fury, betrayal, a profound heart-wrenching sorrow. But beneath it all, a tiny resilient spark ignited. It was the spark of defiance, the flicker of a woman who had been pushed too far. As the door clicked shut, leaving her alone in the cavernous penthouse, a strange sense of clarity washed over her. The tears that had threatened to fall evaporated, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. He had underestimated her. He had mistaken her quiet dignity for weakness, her loyalty for subservience. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Isabel walked over to the grand mahogany desk that dominated one corner of the living room. It was Sebastian's desk, the command center of his empire. But it was also where she, at his insistence, had signed countless documents, her signature, a mere formality, on papers she was told were for tax purposes or minor investments. She had been a trusting, naive young woman when she married him, blinded by his charm and the whirlwind romance. Her father, a shrewd businessman himself, had warned her. "Be careful, my dear," he had said on her wedding day. "Men like Sebastian Croft don't just marry a woman, they acquire her." At the time, she had dismissed his words as the overprotective ramblings of a doting father. Now they echoed in her mind with chilling prescience. She had been an acquisition, a beautiful, well-bred accessory, with a prestigious family name that opened doors even Sebastian's new money couldn't. And now, with an heir on the way, her primary purpose had been served. She sat down in his leather chair, the scent of his expensive cologne lingering in the air. She had always hated that scent, a cloying mix of sandalwood and arrogance. With trembling fingers, she opened the top drawer. It was filled with files, pens, and the mundane paraphernalia of a billionaire's life. But in the back, tucked away beneath a stack of old contracts, was a small, leather-bound notebook. It was her father's last gift to her before he passed away a week before their wedding. "Knowledge is power, Isabel." He had told her, his voice weak, but his eyes sharp. Never let a man have all the power. Inside the notebook, in her father's elegant script, were the names and numbers of people she had never needed to contact. His personal lawyer, a forensic accountant, a private investigator. She had never understood why he had given them to her, until now. Her gaze fell upon the first name on the list, Marcus Thorne, a lawyer known for his discretion and his ruthless efficiency in high-stakes divorces. A man who, according to her father, could find a loophole in a contract written by God himself. With a deep breath, Isabel picked up the phone. She was no longer just Isabel Croft, the dutiful pregnant wife. She was Isabel Delacour, the daughter of a man who had taught her that the greatest asset a woman could have was her own mind, and she was about to use it to dismantle her husband's gilded world piece by piece. The first call was to Marcus Thorne, the second to her bank, the third to a man her father had once described as a digital ghost, a cybersecurity expert who owed him a favor. As she spoke, her voice grew stronger, more confident. The tremor in her hands stilled. The tempest within her had found its eye, a calm, focused center of pure, unadulterated resolve. Sebastian was sailing towards the sunset, blissfully unaware that the sun was about to set on his empire. And the woman he had left behind was the one who was about to eclipse him. The salty air of the Atlantic filled Sebastian's lungs as he stood on the deck of the Serenity, a glass of vintage champagne in hand. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, a masterpiece of nature that he, in his infinite power, felt he had personally commissioned. Beside him, Sienna Vance, clad in a barely-there white bikini, was orchestrating a photo shoot for her millions of Instagram followers. A little to the left, darling, she cooed at the apathetic crew member holding her phone. Capture the light on my cheekbones, and make sure the Croft insignia is visible on the lifebuoy. Sebastian smirked. Sienna was a work of art, a living, breathing testament to his success. She was everything Isabel was not. Carefree, unburdened by tradition, and utterly intoxicatingly obsessed with him. He had convinced himself that Isabel's pregnancy had made her dull, her once sparkling eyes, now clouded with a maternal seriousness that he found profoundly unappealing. He needed excitement, adoration, a woman who reflected his own perceived greatness back at him. Perfect Sienna squealed, snatching her phone back. She immediately began tapping away, her thumbs a blur, as she crafted a caption that would undoubtedly be a mix of inspirational quotes about living in the moment and not so subtle hashtags like #yacht life, #billionaire boyfriend, and #living my best life. Sebastian took a sip of his champagne, the bubbles fizzing on his tongue. He felt a pang of something, a fleeting, uncomfortable emotion he couldn't quite name. Guilt. No, that was too pedestrian, a word for a man of his stature. It was more of an inconvenience. The image of Isabel's face, pale and stricken, flashed in his mind. He quickly pushed it away, replacing it with the thought of the multi-million-dollar deal he was about to close with a Japanese tech giant. That was what mattered. Business. Power. The endless, exhilarating game of acquisition. He had sent Isabel a curt text message, something about the sea being calm and the chef being excellent. He hadn't expected a reply, and he hadn't received one. Good. It meant she was being sensible, accepting her place. He had everything under control. The first inkling that his perfectly controlled world was beginning to fray at the edges came the next morning. He was in the Yacht's state-of-the-art office, a sleek, minimalist space with a panoramic view of the endless ocean. He was about to wire the initial payment for a new acquisition, a rival tech firm he had been circling for months. He typed in his credentials, the familiar, satisfying click of the keys echoing in the silent room. Access denied. He frowned. He must have mistyped the password. He tried again, slowly, deliberately. Access denied. A prickle of annoyance ran down his spine. He tried a different account, one of his personal offshore holdings. Access denied. And another. And another. The same two words flashed on the screen, a digital taunt. A cold knot of dread began to form in the pit of his stomach. He picked up the satellite phone and dialed his personal banker in Zurich. Mr. Croft, the banker, said, his voice unusually strained. There appears to be a situation. A situation, Sebastian snapped. What kind of situation? I can't access any of my accounts. There was a pause, a rustle of papers on the other end of the line. It appears, sir, that a freeze has been placed on all your assets. The words hung in the air, incomprehensible. A freeze. On his assets, it was impossible. He was Sebastian Croft. His wealth was as vast and as untouchable as the ocean surrounding him. On whose authority, he demanded, his voice dangerously low. The banker cleared his throat. On the authority of Mrs. Isabel Croft. Sebastian stared at the phone, a wave of disbelief washing over him, so potent it left him dizzy. Isabel sweet, docile, Isabel. The woman who couldn't even balance her own checkbook. It was a joke, a prank, a very, very bad one. That's absurd. He barked, a harsh, humorless laugh escaping his lips. She wouldn't know how. Put me through to your legal department. Now. While he was being put on hold, a frantic call came in from his CFO in New York. Sebastian, what the hell is going on? Our corporate accounts are frozen. The payroll is due to go out tomorrow. We're locked out of everything. The knot of dread in Sebastian's stomach tightened into a vice. This was not a joke. This was real. This was happening. He slammed the phone down and stormed out of the office, his mind racing. How could she have done this? He had meticulously built a financial fortress around himself, a labyrinth of shell corporations and offshore accounts that even the most seasoned forensic accountants would struggle to navigate. For Isabel to penetrate it was unthinkable. He found Sienna on the sundeck, pouting at her reflection in a compact mirror. My followers are asking why I'm not posting any new content from the Amalfi Coast, she whined, dabbing at her perfectly powdered nose. They're getting bored. There's a slight change of plans. Sebastian said, his voice tight. We need to turn the yacht around. We're going back to New York. Sienna's head snapped up, her eyes wide with indignation. Go back. But we just got here. I have a whole week's worth of outfits planned. I don't think you understand, Sebastian said through gritted teeth. There's a problem. A serious problem. He quickly and with a carefully edited version of the truth explained the situation. He told her there had been a misunderstanding, a bureaucratic error that had temporarily frozen his funds. He was careful to omit the part about Isabel's involvement. He couldn't bear the thought of the look on Sienna's face if she knew his demure little wife was the cause of this chaos. But Sienna was not as vapid as he had believed. She was a shrewd, calculating woman who had built her own small empire on the currency of public perception, and she could smell a scandal a mile away. So you're broke? She asked, her voice laced with a newfound chilling pragmatism. I'm not broke, he snapped. It's a temporary liquidity issue. Sienna's perfectly arched eyebrows rose. A liquidity issue, Sebastian. My brand is built on luxury, on exclusivity. I can't be associated with liquidity issues. She stood up, wrapping a silk sarong around her waist. The playful, adoring girlfriend had vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating businesswoman. I think I need to make a few calls, she said, her voice devoid of its usual syrupy sweetness. And I think you need to figure out how you're going to pay the captain to turn this boat around, because from what I understand about liquidity issues, they don't tend to resolve themselves overnight. She walked away, her hips swaying with a purposefulness he had never seen before. He was left alone on the deck, the half-empty bottle of champagne mocking him from its silver bucket. The sun, which had seemed so glorious just hours before now, felt oppressive, its heat a suffocating blanket. He had made a fatal miscalculation. He had believed that his power resided in his wealth, in his ability to buy and sell and control. He had forgotten that true power, the kind that could bring an empire to its knees, often came from the most unexpected of places. And as he stared out at the endless, indifferent ocean, he finally understood. He was not the master of this universe. He was just a man on a boat, a man who had been outmaneuvered by the one person he had never considered a worthy opponent. The unraveling of Sebastian Croft had begun, and it was being orchestrated by a woman sitting in his penthouse, sipping chamomile tea, a serene smile on her face as she watched her husband's world burn. Back in New York, Isabel was the picture of calm in the eye of the storm she had created. The penthouse, once a symbol of her gilded captivity, now felt like a war room, a sanctuary of strategic planning. The scent of Sebastian's cologne had been replaced by the comforting aroma of old books and freshly brewed tea. The grand mahogany desk was now her command center, littered with financial statements, legal documents, and a well-thumbed copy of Sun Tzu's The Art of War. She was not alone. Seated opposite her was Marcus Thorne, a man whose sharp suit and even sharper eyes exuded a quiet, confident competence. He had her father's pragmatism and a shark-like instinct for the jugular that Isabel was beginning to greatly appreciate. The preliminary injunction was a work of art, if I do say so myself, Marcus said, a rare smile gracing his lips. The judge was particularly moved by the endangerment of the unborn heir argument. Your obstetrician's affidavit regarding the risks of stress during the third trimester was the chef's kiss. Isabel allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had been honest with Dr. Evans, not about the financial machinations, but about the emotional distress Sebastian's affair and his sudden, cruel dismissal of her had caused. The doctor, a compassionate woman who had seen too many women like Isabel, had been more than happy to provide a strongly worded letter. "What's his next move?" Isabel asked, her voice steady. "He's lawyered up, of course," Marcus replied, tapping a pen on the folder in front of him. "He's hired Donovan Finch, a pit bull of a litigator, known for his scorched earth tactics. Finch will file a motion to have the asset freeze lifted, claiming it's a malicious and unfounded attack on his client's character and business operations. And will he succeed?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, his eyes twinkling. "Ordinarily, he might have a chance. But we are not an ordinary case. Your father, bless his forward-thinking soul, was a master of corporate structuring. When you married Sebastian, your father insisted on the creation of a prenuptial agreement that was, shall we say, unconventional." Isabel vaguely remembered signing the document, her mind clouded with wedding plans and romantic notions. Sebastian had dismissed it as a formality, a quirk of her father's old-fashioned ways. "I thought it just protected my family's inheritance," she said. "Oh, it does much more than that," Marcus explained. "Your father being the majority shareholder in the company that provided the seed money for Sebastian's first major venture, structured the prenup in such a way that you upon marriage became a silent partner in Croft Enterprises. Not just a beneficiary, Isabel, a partner with voting rights, and more importantly, the power to veto any financial transactions that could be deemed detrimental to the long-term stability of the company." Isabel stared at him, dumbfounded. I had no idea. "Your father was a brilliant man," Marcus said softly. "He knew Sebastian's type. He built you a Trojan horse, and Sebastian, in his arrogance, wheeled it right into the heart of his empire." The full weight of her father's love and foresight washed over Isabel, bringing tears to her eyes. He had protected her, even from beyond the grave. Furthermore, Marcus continued, his voice bringing her back to the present. "Your signature, which Sebastian has so cavalierly obtained on countless documents over the years, has been your secret weapon. You've been co-signing on loans, acquisitions, and the creation of shell corporations. In the eyes of the law, you are not just the wronged wife. You are an integral part of the business. And by providing evidence of Sebastian's reckless behavior, the affair, the lavish spending on his mistress, the potential for a scandalous and costly divorce, we have made a compelling case that his actions are indeed detrimental to the long-term stability of the company." A knock on the door interrupted them. It was Maria, the housekeeper, who had been with Isabel's family for decades and had come with her to the penthouse after her marriage. Maria was a woman of few words, but her loyalty was fierce and unwavering. "A package has arrived for you, Miss Isabel," she said, her eyes warm with a knowing sympathy. The package was from the digital ghost, the cybersecurity expert her father had recommended. Inside was a sleek, encrypted hard drive. Isabel plugged it into her laptop and a single file appeared on the screen. It was a video. She clicked play. The screen flickered to life, showing the sun-drenched deck of the Serenity. Sebastian and Sienna, oblivious to the camera, were in the middle of a heated argument. The audio was crystal clear, a testament to the expert's skill. "Can't believe you're letting her do this to you." Sienna's voice was shrill, stripped of its usual seductive purr. She's a nobody, a boring little housewife. And you're Sebastian Croft. You should be crushing her. It's not that simple. Sebastian's voice was strained heavy, with a frustration that was oddly satisfying to witness. She's locked everything down. The lawyers are working on it. Lawyers, Sienna scoffed. While they're shuffling papers, my reputation is going down the drain. I'm a laughingstock. Sienna Vance, the girl who dated a broke billionaire. Do you know what that does to my brand? My brand is taking a bit of a hit too, in case you hadn't noticed, Sebastian retorted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. This is all your fault, Sienna shot back. You were supposed to have her under control. You told me she was weak, that she'd do anything you said. She was. Sebastian muttered more to himself than to Sienna. I don't know what's gotten into her. I'll tell you what's gotten into her, Sienna sneered. She's finally grown a backbone, and you, my dear Sebastian, are about to find out just how sharp it is. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a call to make. I need to find a new benefactor, one with a more stable portfolio. She turned and walked away, leaving Sebastian alone, his handsome face a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. Isabel closed the laptop, a slow, cold smile spreading across her face. The video was more than just a satisfying piece of schadenfreude. It was leverage. It was proof of Sebastian's emotional instability, of the chaos his personal life was inflicting on his professional one. It was another arrow in her quiver, another nail in his coffin. Send a copy of that to Donovan Finch, she said to Marcus, her voice as cool and as clear as a winter morning. Let him see the kind of client he's representing. Marcus's eyebrows shot up in appreciation. Playing hardball. Mrs. Croft, I like it. I'm just getting started, Isabel replied, her gaze drifting towards the window, towards the city that was once her cage and was now her kingdom. The unraveling of Sebastian Croft was not just a legal or financial strategy. It was a reclamation of her own power, her own identity. She was no longer just a wife or a mother-to-be. She was a warrior, a queen defending her territory and her child. And she would not rest until she had dismantled Sebastian's empire, brick by gilded brick, and built her own in its place. One founded not on arrogance and deceit, but on strength, integrity, and the unshakable love of a father who had known all along that his daughter was destined for more than just a supporting role in someone else's story. The video of Sienna and Sebastian's argument on the Serenity had the desired effect. Donovan Finch, after viewing the clip, had requested an emergency meeting with his client. The details of that meeting remained confidential, but the subsequent change in Sebastian's legal strategy was palpable. The aggressive, almost belligerent tone of his initial filings was replaced by a more conciliatory one. An offer of a settlement arrived on Marcus Thorne's desk a day later. It was a generous offer by most standards. A multi-million-dollar payout, the penthouse, and a sizable trust fund for the baby. It was an offer designed to make her go away quietly, to sweep the scandal under the rug, and allow Sebastian to salvage what was left of his reputation. Isabel looked at the offer, then at Marcus. He thinks he can buy my silence, she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. He still doesn't get it. It would seem. Not Marcus agreed. So what's our counteroffer? Isabel smiled a slow, deliberate smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. My counteroffer is this. I want a public apology. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. A public apology, Isabel. He'll never agree to that. It's professional suicide. That's the point, she said, her voice as hard as steel. I want him to stand in front of the world and admit what he did. I want him to admit that he lied, that he cheated, and that he tried to abandon his pregnant wife for his mistress. I want every woman who has ever been made to feel small and insignificant by a man like him to see that there are consequences. It was an audacious demand, a move that went beyond legal and financial retribution. It was a play for moral victory, a gambit to win in the court of public opinion. And it was a move that Sebastian, in his arrogance, was bound to refuse. As expected, the offer was rejected and the battle lines were drawn. Finch, with his client's back against the wall, went on the offensive. The tabloids, which had been feasting on the scraps of the scandal, were suddenly flooded with anonymous sources painting Isabel as a vindictive, money-hungry shrew, a woman using her pregnancy as a weapon to extort a loving, albeit flawed, husband. They painted her as unstable, her actions attributed to a cocktail of pregnancy hormones and jealousy. They even resurrected an old college photograph of her at a party, a red cup in her hand, and tried to spin it into a narrative of a wild, reckless past. Isabel watched the smear campaign unfold with a detached sense of bemusement. It was a classic move from the playbook of powerful men. When you can't win on the facts, you attack the woman's character. But she was prepared. With the help of a savvy parfum recommended by Marcus, Isabel decided to tell her own story, not through the salacious headlines of the tabloids, but in a quiet, dignified interview with a respected female journalist known for her in-depth human interest pieces. The interview took place in the penthouse, but Isabel chose to be filmed not in the opulent living room, but in the nursery she had been lovingly preparing for her son. Surrounded by soft, muted colors, a hand-knitted blanket draped over the crib. She spoke with a quiet eloquence that was more powerful than any of Sebastian's blustering denials. She didn't sling mud. She didn't raise her voice. She simply told the truth. She spoke of her love for her husband, of her dreams for their family, and of the profound pain of his betrayal. She spoke of the fear and uncertainty she felt when he told her she was to be left behind, and of the steely resolve that had replaced that fear. This was never about money, she said, her hand resting protectively on her belly. This is about respect. It's about a woman's right to be treated as a partner, not a possession. And it's about creating a world where my son will learn to treat women with the dignity and kindness they deserve. The interview was a masterstroke. The public, who had been fed a diet of sensationalism and gossip, were captivated by her grace and her quiet strength. She was not the hysterical, vengeful woman Sebastian's camp had tried to portray her as. She was a mother, a wife, a woman fighting for her dignity. The tide of public opinion turned swiftly and decisively. Social media, which had once been Sienna's playground, now became a forum for an outpouring of support for Isabel. Team Isabel trended for days. Women from all walks of life shared their own stories of being underestimated, of finding their own strength in the face of adversity. Sienna Vance, who had tried to distance herself from the scandal by jetting off to Dubai and posting photos of herself with a new, equally wealthy benefactor, found herself at the center of a firestorm. Her carefully curated image of a carefree, empowered woman was shattered. Her followers, mostly young women who had once idolized her, now saw her for what she was: a vapid, transactional opportunist. Her comment sections were flooded with vitriol, her follower count plummeted, and her lucrative brand deals were cancelled one by one. Her 15 minutes of fame were over. Her brand toxic, her future as an influencer in ruins. Sebastian, holed up in his lawyer's office, watched his world crumble. His business partners, spooked by the negative publicity and the ongoing legal battle, began to distance themselves. The Japanese tech deal, the one he had been so sure of, had fallen through. The board of directors of Croft Enterprises, a group of old-money traditionalists who valued discretion and stability, above all else, were calling for an emergency meeting. But the final, most devastating blow was yet to come. Marcus Thorne, with the help of the forensic accountant, had been digging deep into Sebastian's past long before he had met Isabel. And they had found something, a secret Sebastian had buried long ago, a secret that would not only destroy what was left of his reputation, but could also land him in prison. Marcus presented the findings to Isabel in a sealed envelope. "This is it," he said, his voice grim. "This is the checkmate." Isabel opened the envelope, her heart pounding. Inside were documents, bank statements, and a sworn affidavit from a man who had once been Sebastian's partner in his very first business venture, a small tech startup he had founded in his early 20s. The documents told a sordid tale of betrayal and fraud. Sebastian, in his hunger for success, had cheated his partner out of his share of the company using a series of forged documents and shell corporations to divert the profits into his own accounts. The partner, a brilliant but naive programmer, had been left with nothing, his life and career ruined. He had been too intimidated and too broke to fight Sebastian at the time, but he had kept the evidence waiting for the day when he might finally get justice. Isabel stared at the documents, a wave of nausea washing over her. This went beyond infidelity, beyond arrogance and cruelty. This was the work of a man with no moral compass, a man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. He didn't just build his empire, she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of revulsion and a strange, cold pity. He stole it. And now Marcus said, his voice soft but firm, "You have the power to take it all away." The choice was hers. She could use this information to destroy him completely, to send him to prison and ensure he would never hurt anyone again. Or she could use it as the ultimate leverage, a weapon to force him into a final, unconditional surrender. She looked around the nursery, at the soft, gentle world she had created for her unborn son. She thought of the man her father had been, a man of integrity and honor. She thought of the woman she had become, a woman who had found her own strength, not through vengeance, but through a quiet, unshakable resolve. She knew what she had to do. This was not about destroying Sebastian. It was about building a future, a safe and secure future for her child, a future free from the toxic legacy of his father. She picked up the phone and dialed Marcus's number. "I'm ready to make my final offer," she said, her voice clear and strong. "And this time there will be no negotiations." The endgame was in sight. And Isabel Croft, the woman who had once been a prisoner in a gilded cage, was about to become its undisputed queen. The final showdown did not take place in a sterile courtroom or a high-stakes boardroom. It took place where it all began, the palatial penthouse overlooking Central Park. Isabel had requested the meeting, and Sebastian, his options exhausted, and his back against a wall of his own making, had no choice but to agree. He arrived looking like a ghost of his former self. The tailored suit hung loosely on his frame. His once tanned skin was pale and sallow, and his stormy eyes were clouded with a weary desperation. He was a king who had been deposed, a titan who had been brought to his knees. Isabel, in contrast, was radiant. Her pregnancy, which he had once seen as an unsightly burden, now seemed to emanate a quiet, powerful grace. She wore a simple white dress, her hair pulled back from a face that was serene and composed. She was not the hysterical, emotional woman he had dismissed. She was a formidable opponent, a queen in her own right. She did not offer him a drink. She did not engage in small talk. She simply gestured for him to sit on the sofa opposite her, the same sofa where she had shed so many silent tears over his betrayals. "I have the final divorce settlement here," she said, her voice calm and even. She pushed a single document across the coffee table. "It's non-negotiable." Sebastian picked it up with a trembling hand. He read it, his face growing paler with each paragraph. It was not a document of financial demands. It was a document of complete and utter abdication. She was not asking for half his fortune. She was taking it all. The settlement stipulated that he would cede all his shares in Croft Enterprises to a trust fund for their unborn son, a trust that she would manage until the child came of age. He would be stripped of his title, his position on the board, and any and all claims to the company he had built. The penthouse, the yacht, the art collection, the portfolio of properties, everything would be transferred to her name. He would be left with the single modest bank account, enough to start a new life, but not enough to ever again wield the kind of power he had once taken for granted. In return for his complete and total capitulation, the evidence of his past fraud, the secret that could send him to prison, would remain sealed, a sword of Damocles hanging over his head, should he ever decide to challenge the terms of the agreement. "You can't do this," he whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "This is everything, my life's work. Your life's work was built on a lie." Isabel said, her voice unwavering. "You stole it from a man who trusted you. You are lucky. I am not a more vengeful woman. Sebastian, I am not sending you to prison, though I have every right to. I am giving you a second chance, a chance to live a life of honesty and integrity. I suggest you take it." He looked at her, his eyes searching her face for a flicker of the old Isabel, the docile, adoring wife who would have been horrified at her own audacity. But that woman was gone. In her place was a stranger, a woman of steel and resolve. Why, he asked the question, a raw, desperate plea. "Why are you doing this?" Isabel stood up and walked to the window, her hand resting on her belly. She looked out at the city, at the endless expanse of possibilities that now lay before her. "Because you taught me a valuable lesson, Sebastian," she said, her voice soft but clear. "You taught me that the only person you can truly rely on in this world is yourself. You taught me that power, real power, isn't about money or possessions. It's about having the courage to stand up for what is right, to protect the ones you love, and to never ever let anyone make you feel small." She turned to face him, a sad, final smile on her lips. "You underestimated me. You saw me as an accessory, a means to an end. You never saw me as your partner, as your equal. And that was your fatal mistake." In that moment, Sebastian finally understood. He had not been defeated by a team of lawyers or a series of legal maneuvers. He had been defeated by the quiet, unassuming woman he had so carelessly cast aside. He had been so blinded by his own reflection that he had failed to see the strength and intelligence that had been there all along. He signed the document, his signature, a shaky, defeated scrawl. He stood up, a broken man in a world he no longer controlled. He walked to the door, and for the first time he looked back at her, a flicker of somethings that might have been remorse in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Isabel," he said the words, barely a whisper. "I know," she replied, and she did. She knew he was sorry for getting caught, sorry for losing everything. But she also knew that he would never truly understand the depth of the pain he had caused. As the door closed behind him, a profound sense of peace washed over Isabel. It was over. The battle was won. A few weeks later, Isabel gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Nicholas after her father. As she held him in her arms, looking down at his tiny, perfect face, she knew that she had made the right decision. She had not just secured a fortune for her son. She had secured a future free from the toxic legacy of his father. She took over as the head of Croft Enterprises, and to the surprise of the skeptical, all-male board, she proved to be a natural leader. She had her father's business acumen and a newfound hard-won confidence that commanded respect. She rebranded the company, steering it away from the aggressive, cutthroat practices of its founder and towards a more ethical, sustainable model of business. She became a philanthropist, a champion for women's rights, and a role model for a new generation of female leaders. And Sebastian, he disappeared from the headlines, a footnote in the story of his own downfall. There were rumors that he had moved to a small, quiet town in the Midwest, that he was living a simple, anonymous life. Some said he had found a measure of peace. Others said he was haunted by the ghosts of his past, a lonely king in a self-imposed exile. Isabel never saw him again. She didn't need to. She was too busy building her own empire. Not of glass and steel, but of strength, integrity, and a mother's unconditional love. She had been refused a place on her husband's yacht, so she had built her own fleet. And as she stood on the balcony of her penthouse, her son in her arms, looking out at the city that was now hers to conquer, she knew with a certainty that was as vast and as bright as the morning sun that her journey was just beginning. She was no longer Isabel Croft, the millionaire's wife. She was Isabel de la Cour, the architect of her own destiny, the queen of her own magnificent world. 5 years had passed. The name Croft Enterprises was a distant memory. a relic of a past life. In its place stood Delacour Global, a powerhouse in ethical investment and sustainable technology, with Isabelle Delacour at its helm. The company was a reflection of its leader, sleek, intelligent, and driven by a quiet but unshakable moral compass. The penthouse, once a symbol of her confinement, was now a warm, vibrant home filled with the laughter of her 4-year-old son, Nicholas, a bright, inquisitive boy with his mother's eyes and her father's charming smile. Isabelle had found a rhythm she once thought impossible. Her days were a whirlwind of board meetings, strategic planning sessions, and philanthropic galas. Her evenings were sacred, reserved for building block towers, reading bedtime stories, and tucking Nicholas into bed. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a sovereign, secure in the empire she had rebuilt and the life she had forged. The latest project, to capture her attention, was a potential partnership with the Phoenix Foundation, a non-profit organization renowned for its work in rehabilitating non-violent offenders and providing them with the mentorship and seed capital to start their own businesses. The foundation's ethos resonated deeply with Isabelle's own belief in second chances. After months of due diligence led by the ever-cautious Marcus Thorne, the final meeting was set. Delacour Global was poised to become their largest corporate sponsor. Isabelle entered the glass-walled boardroom, her presence commanding the immediate respect of her team. At the head of the table sat Eleanor Vance, no relation to Sienna, the formidable founder of the Phoenix Foundation, a woman whose compassionate work was matched only by her sharp business sense. "Isabelle, thank you for making the time." Eleanor began, her voice warm. "Before we sign the final papers, I wanted to introduce you to our newest team member. He's a testament to what the Phoenix Foundation is all about. He came to us with nothing, worked his way through our program, and has just launched a small but successful sustainable farming cooperative. He's now joining us as a mentor to guide others. He is the very embodiment of redemption." The boardroom door opened, and in walked the echo of Isabelle's past. It was Sebastian. The intervening years had not been kind yet. They had chiseled away his arrogance, replacing it with something quieter, more weary. His hair was streaked with grey at the temples, and faint lines of hardship were etched around his eyes and mouth. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a simple, clean-cut blazer and trousers that spoke of humility, not power. He looked up, and his eyes met Isabelle's across the long, polished table. The shock in the room was a tangible thing, a sudden drop in pressure that sucked all the air out. Marcus Thorne was on his feet in an instant, his face a mask of thunderous fury. "What is the meaning of this? This meeting is over." Sebastian flinched as if struck, but he held his ground. He looked only at Isabelle, his gaze stripped of its former entitlement. It held a deep, profound shame. "Isabelle, Miss Delacour." He said, his voice raspy, unfamiliar. "I had no idea. If I had known this was your company, I would never have—" He trailed off, unable to finish. Eleanor Vance looked between them, her face a canvas of confusion and dawning horror. I don't understand. Do you know each other?" Isabelle's heart was hammering against her ribs, a frantic trapped bird. Her mind raced a torrent of questions and suspicions. Was this a trick? A long con to get back into her life, into her company? A desperate, pathetic attempt at manipulation? She schooled her features into a calm, unreadable mask, the one she had perfected years ago. "Yes," Isabelle said, her voice impossibly steady. "Mr. Croft is my ex-husband." The silence that followed was deafening. The members of her board exchanged panicked glances. This was a PR nightmare in the making. The rehabilitated ex-con at the heart of their new charitable partnership was the very man whose spectacular downfall had been orchestrated by their CEO. "I think it's best if you leave, Sebastian." Isabelle said, her tone leaving no room for argument. He nodded, his face pale. "Of course, Eleanor, I am so sorry." He turned and walked out of the room without a backward glance, the door clicking softly shut behind him, a sound that echoed the finality of their last meeting in the penthouse. The moment he was gone, the room erupted. "We're pulling out," obviously Marcus stated, his voice tight with anger. "The man is a predator. This is some kind of scheme." "Hold on," countered an older board member, a shrewd man named George. "Let's not be hasty. Think of the optics here." We walk away. It looks like a personal vendetta. We embrace it. A story of forgiveness, of redemption, of a woman so successful she can afford to be magnanimous to the man who wronged her. It's a powerful narrative. Isabel felt a wave of nausea. They were talking about her life, her pain as a narrative, a PR angle to be spun. She held up a hand, silencing the debate. "I need a moment," she said, walking out of the boardroom and onto a small, private balcony overlooking the city. The cool air did little to calm the tempest inside her. Seeing him had ripped open a scar she thought had long since faded. Later that evening, a handwritten letter was delivered to her by messenger. It was from Sebastian. She almost threw it away, but a reluctant curiosity stayed her hand. With trembling fingers, she read it. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't make excuses. He simply, and with painstaking honesty, detailed the last 5 years of his life. He wrote of the crushing weight of his public humiliation, of working menial jobs under false names, of hitting rock bottom in a lonely, bleak apartment, and of the day he had stumbled upon the Phoenix Foundation, a last, desperate hope. He wrote of the slow, arduous process of rebuilding his life, not his fortune, but his character. "I know I deserve nothing from you," he concluded. "Not your trust, not your forgiveness, and certainly not your help. I will resign from the foundation tomorrow. I would never do anything to jeopardize their work or to cause you any more pain. I just wanted you to know, for what it's worth, that the man you knew is gone. I spent years destroying lives, starting with my own. Now all I want to do is help rebuild them. That is the only legacy I have left to give." Isabel read the letter again, and then a third time. The cold knot of suspicion in her stomach began to loosen, replaced by a confusing swirl of emotions. Pity, yes. But something else too, a flicker of recognition. Was it possible, could a man like Sebastian truly change so fundamentally? The decision before her was more complex than any business deal she had ever navigated. To approve the partnership would be to invite him back into the periphery of her life, a constant, uncomfortable reminder of the past. It would be a risk, a leap of faith in a man who had proven himself to be the ultimate betrayer. But to refuse, to walk away, would be to punish the foundation and the countless people it helped, all because of her own personal history. It would be an act of self-protection, but would it also be an act of cruelty? It would mean denying the very principle of second chances that she so publicly championed. She looked over at a framed photo on her desk. It was of her and Nicola at a park, both of them laughing, their faces bright with uncomplicated joy. She was a different woman now, a stronger woman. She had built a fortress around her life and her heart. The question was that fortress strong enough to let the ghost of her past knock on its door without letting him in? Or was true strength found not in building walls, but in having the courage to open the gate? The signed partnership agreement lay on her desk, waiting for her final approval. Her pen hovered over the signature line, the future of Delacour Global, the Phoenix Foundation, and her own hard-won peace hanging in the balance. And there you have it, the incredible story of Isabel Croft, a woman who refused to be a victim and instead became the victor. Her journey from a scorned wife to a powerful CEO is a testament to the strength that lies within all of us. When faced with betrayal, she didn't just get even, she got everything. Her story is a powerful reminder that you should never underestimate a woman with a plan.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, Give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.